You're listening to the Jōrni Podcast. What could life feel like if our chronic conditions were reversible? Find out more in today's episode. Hi, I'm Petra Brunbauer. What if everything we've been told about holistic health, healing, and well-being is only part of the story? Because thriving in today's world looks different than it used to. Here, we challenge the narratives, rethink what it means to become human, and explore how that shapes the way we lead, live, and step into our full potential. This is the Jōrni Podcast. Welcome to today's episode. We tend to trust that when something is wrong with our health, a test will find it. Yet some of us live with chronic fatigue and unexplained physical symptoms, while every lab test comes back clear. Miguel Bautista is the founder of CFS Recovery, a global recovery program helping people overcome chronic fatigue syndrome, long COVID, fibromyalgia, and related nervous system-driven conditions. After spending years battling severe unexplained symptoms that left him bedridden and hospitalized, Miguel developed a practical, systemized approach focused on nervous system regulation and long-term recovery. Today, CFS Recovery has helped thousands of people worldwide regain function, stability, and independence through structured coaching and recovery frameworks. Miguel is also known for simplifying complex recovery concepts into clear, actionable strategies through his educational content and YouTube channel. Here is my interview with Miguel Bautista. Hi, Miguel. It's so great to have you on the podcast today. I've been looking forward to getting to chat with you because we will be talking about, I want to say, one of my favorite topics, which has to do all about nervous system dysregulation, regulation, and some of the things that are connected to that, like chronic fatigue syndrome, long COVID, and any of those other themes that come along with a dysregulated nervous system. I'm really glad you're here to take us deeper into this topic, which I feel is so important in the world right now. Thanks for being here. Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. And first off, I love the topics that you cover on these episodes. I think for so many people dealing with burnout and feeling like their nervous system is stuck in that freeze state, who feel like they just have to manage it, I think we're proving every day that there is a solution to a lot of these things people deal with. There is hope. Recovery is possible. And for everybody listening, if the Jōrni Podcast has given you some hope on your health journey, do Petra a favor, leave a 5-star review. I already left mine. That helps her continue putting this content out. As a content creator myself, I know how much work goes into it. Really glad to be here.
Thanks for your really kind words. And I feel my heart is full. And thanks for giving me a shout out. I really appreciate it. And none of this would be possible without the amazing human beings like yourself who are doing this work, who are providing some of this insight, this wisdom, and some of the solutions that people are finding for themselves and then actually work on that in their own lives. This is, I feel, a big part of coming together in collaborations and in community is that we actually talk about what we have found, what has worked, and keep that door open to exploring options, solutions, different kind of things that might just work for people. So yeah, we all have lots of stories on a million things that didn't work, but then there was that one thing that actually made a difference. So I'm so glad you're here to share more about that. And would you like to maybe start us off with a bit about yourself, the parts of your journey and your story that you feel relate to what you do today, and share with our listeners a little bit about what it is that you do today?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start with a very high-level overview, but my name is Miguel Bautista. I'm the founder of CFS Recovery. We essentially help people whose nervous systems are stuck in that freeze mode, and they're dealing with some mysterious debilitating symptoms that the doctors just can't explain. And we help them fully recover and get their lives back through nervous system regulation and neuroplasticity. And the interesting thing about your audience, Petra, is they already know, if they've been listening to your stuff, what functional freeze is. They've already started doing some of the work. They already have some knowledge around it. what I'd love to talk about today is what happens when that functional freeze doesn't get caught in time, or when you don't interrupt that pattern and it just starts to spiral, right? What happens when it keeps progressing and the body starts producing symptoms that doctors don't even have names for these illnesses yet, like the post-exertional crashes, post-exertional malaise, all the brain fog stuff. We've helped 2,000 plus clients across 50 plus countries, thousands of hours of coaching and lots of case studies. And we've seen people get this as early as 9 years old or as old as 86 years old, dealing with this for either 3 months or 50 plus years. But what I'm most proud of is seeing people across all of those ranges and severities, even all the way to bedridden or semi-functional, fully getting their lives back again and being symptom-free. And I was actually one of those people. That's why I started this CFS Recovery company. Growing up, I would call myself a high performer. I was always getting the straight A's in school. I was joining every club I could think of, every sport. I was that person trying to squeeze the most out of the lemon of life. I want to be as productive as possible. So interestingly enough, a lot of people who get these types of symptoms and feel these things, they're like super type A people, also perfectionists or overly analytical. Maybe they have trouble setting boundaries or saying no. And that's kind of like the perfect recipe to developing a lot of this stuff. So after high school, I eventually moved into personal training, but took on way too much work and pushed my body to its absolute limits. I would say like my drive and this like hunger for quote unquote success kind of just dug me into a deep hole, to the point where I started feeling some symptoms. Then as somebody who's type A, you feel some of those things and you're like, okay, I accept the challenge. Let me push twice as hard. And you end up getting worse and more severe, to the point where at my worst, I was actually bedridden for about 6 months, living with my grandparents. I showered maybe once a month. My grandparents had to spoon feed me, and I couldn't even walk. And I continued to get worse because I didn't know what was going on. The symptoms were compounding. Ended up in the hospital for 2 months, actually. I literally didn't think I'd be able to walk again. This was about 8 years ago. So I was 22 at the time, but that was kind of like my rock bottom. And the thing is, like a lot of people listening to podcasts like this, I went to the doctors. I went to the specialists. They all kind of looked at me like I was crazy because all my tests were coming back perfectly fine, which I wonder how many people relate to that listening to this right now. Not only was it physically difficult, but mentally and emotionally, I was losing my identity. And I wonder how many people dealing with this also go through that same kind of challenge. For me, it was just as difficult mentally and emotionally than it was physically, because you kind of lose who you are. You can't really function in the world. You have to put your life on hold, essentially. But yeah, ended up in the hospital. Luckily, met a doctor who knew exactly what was going on. This was like my 40th doctor I've seen over the years. And I went from completely bedridden to wheelchair to walker to standing on my own 2 feet. And after a month of working with him, got released from the hospital, and took a couple years to build myself back up. But now symptom free, I travel, work more than full time. We were just talking before this started. We both work very hard, maybe a bit too hard sometimes, but we don't get symptoms anymore. And I think it's because my nervous system is now at the point where it's anti-fragile. I'm actually better than I was before. And the cool part is we've seen this happen with hundreds and hundreds of other people. Their nervous systems actually get stronger after it goes through an ordeal like that, if you recover properly and put some things in place to make sure your comeback is strong and sustainable. But that's a little bit of my background. It's been a pretty wild journey to get here, and happy to dive into any other parts.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. And there are so many things in this story and journey that you just shared that I'm feeling hopeful about. I shake my head at. There are so many things coming up. And the fact that people like yourself, like myself, we go to the doctors when something is wrong. That's the first thing that we do, right? We start feeling off, we go see a doctor. And a lot of the times, everything actually looks completely fine. They run labs and they do their thing. And it's just this confusion that sets in of, okay, actually, you're totally fine. and this realization in our own lives, oh, we're constantly exhausted, or we can't walk, or we can't leave the bed, right? This is not a normal state of being for us, not a normal state of thriving. But the discussion often still stays very physical. There is hardly anything that's explored beyond that. So I'm so glad that you actually found a doctor who was thinking a little bit outside of the box and looking at what was happening and coming up with a solution, a way forward for you. I'm so excited about that. And I really hope that going forward, we have more and more doctors like that connect the dots really and kind of start looking in that direction. So yeah, and I'm also taken aback by the range of clients that you have worked with, young children who are experiencing this, elderly who are experiencing this, right? This really sucks the quality of life out of our lives when we deal with something like this. And this can go on for decades. For me, this is the most scary part. We can suffer like this for decades because we just don't know where to start. So yeah, thanks for sharing this and shedding a little bit of light on what these journeys can look like. And really also for our listeners that sometimes, and I would say actually very often, what starts as some kind of physical journey actually has a lot more attached to it than that. So a lot of hope and how we can deal with this going forward. So share with us a little bit about, I want to say, obviously you knew at the time in your journey that you weren't feeling well and that you weren't doing well. And that was not the kind of life that you probably had envisioned or wanted to live, being bedridden. So how did that come together in the first steps of understanding where you would go forward from that? I imagine this is when you met the doctor you mentioned, but what happened to actually give you some hope and thinking, oh, there might actually be something there that might help?
Yeah, I think with my journey, and for so many people out there who have turned this around and got to the other side of this whole recovery illness journey, sometimes you have to reach almost that breaking point to be open-minded enough to be receptive to the mind-body approach. And also that's another thing too, like I heard about this mind-body stuff many times, but I was like, mind? What do you mean mind? I'm feeling this stuff in my physical body. I can't just think my way better. But what most mind-body content skips is or at least on the front end, I think it should be called like brain-body approach. Because when people hear brain, it's tangible. So, oh, it's that thing inside your head. But when people hear mind, they associate that with just like thoughts. But the truth is, like, thoughts do lead to changes in your brain. So for me, I had to be open to that, and I had to be in like a really dark place to finally accept that as a possible solution. And it took me really long to get there. I think actually from what we've seen, usually high performers or people who get this stuff, people who are type A personality are usually the slowest to catch themselves in this freeze mode and actually do something about it. Because when the symptoms hit, they usually apply the same playbook that built the rest of their life, like built their success, like discipline, structure, research, pushing through, toughing it out. And it makes sense because that playbook worked for everything else. So why wouldn't it work here for recovery? So you have somebody who potentially used to run a team at work or was a leader, either with their friends or at work. Maybe they raised kids, maybe they trained hard, maybe all of that at the same time. So they're really proud of that engine that they've built, but now they can barely make it through the day without needing to lie down or take breaks. Maybe they've made a spreadsheet of every supplement. They have a symptom tracker. Maybe they're running their own recovery like a project. But deep inside, they're asking themselves, what is actually happening to me? Normally, having discipline and structure works. I've never failed at anything that I put my mind to. So if I just push harder, maybe I could break through this. How is this happening to me of all people? So there's all these things going through your head. You start to feel like you're going crazy. The thing is, the reason that didn't work is the same drive that got them there is probably what's keeping them stuck, because the nervous system reads this trying harder as, hey, let's stay in survival mode. So their best tool, which is their willpower and their discipline, is likely what's locking in that freeze mode. Instead, we really try to teach people that recovery is the one thing in their life that doesn't respond to very structured discipline. It responds to more so going with the flow, more so taking it easy, actually slowing down, surrendering into rest. So the work is actually unlearning that engine that built them, because those are all the steps I had to go through. And sometimes it's not until you have no other options that you're willing to give up that thing that got you to this point in the first place. They might think they need to push harder, but we like to tell them, hey, you actually need to do the opposite. That's the whole reason you're here in the first place. And a question I'd love to ask people is, what if the most disciplined version of you, the one that you're most proud of, the one that got you here, that got you all the accolades and successes in life, what if that's also the version of you that's keeping you stuck, right? And so what I want them to know is that the drive isn't the enemy. It's just been maybe pointed at the wrong targets. We have people who get this, they typically have this double-edged sword superpower where they can focus very deeply on certain things. But when we don't control that, it's like keeping our foot on the gas pedal and redlining the engine, never taking our foot off the gas pedal. Once we learn to harness that, learn how to drive that vehicle, that engine, without running it into the ground, that's when really cool things can happen. And I feel like I've got there, you've probably got there, right? With the amount of sleep you're getting and all the work you've been doing, because we can put our foot on the gas pedal, then we can also take it off. We can feel into our bodies. We have that intuition now, but we had to probably go through these experiences to unlock that. So that's something we really help people with. Yeah, I think I veered off the original question, but just wanted to point that out. I think you mentioned, how did I kind of turn this around? So it was actually coming to that realization that, okay, the approach that I've been going with that I think would have got me through this hasn't worked. In fact, I'm actually getting worse. So let's try a whole different approach. And so when my doctor started explaining what could be happening to me, hey, this sounds like it's a nervous system issue. Your organs are completely fine. You're not going to have a heart attack. Because I was dealing with 50 plus symptoms. I couldn't feed myself. I'd open my eyes and just the lights would give me migraines. If I wasn't wearing earplugs, it's like someone was banging drums in my ear. I'd get tinnitus. My whole body was on fire. Someone would touch me, I feel like it's on fire. The thing is, all my tests were completely fine. So he basically said, this is not an organ problem. It like head down, nothing but head down, nothing is broken. What's probably happening is there's a glitch in your software. Your brain is like a supercomputer, and it seems like it's just sending the wrong signals to your body. It's the only explanation for what you're feeling. And actually, I've seen this before, and I've helped people just as bad as you. So when he said that, I was like, all right, man, I'm all in. If you told me to eat cardboard, I'll eat cardboard, because it seems like you know what you're doing. Nobody else had any idea. And I was all in from that moment. And he taught me all these principles, which is now the foundation of what we teach people that we built off of. So I had to be at that breaking point in order to even be receptive to this stuff.
I love that you dove a little bit deeper into all of this, because it gives our listeners a lot more context on how this actually all comes together, what happens, on why we find ourselves in these situations. Because I think it's one of the hardest things to come to terms with. And also one of the things that really affects our mental health is dealing with these emotional and mental aspects of what's happening, because we try to reason about it. We try to logically think of a way out, and that even entrenches even more what is happening. So yeah, thanks for taking a deep dive into that. I find this is one of the most fascinating pieces of how this comes together. And can you tell us a little bit more about what happens actually in our nervous system and in our brain that kind of perpetuates not just functional freeze, but a lot of the other conditions that you are working with, like chronic fatigue and even, I think, long COVID, fibromyalgia, a lot of those are kind of going in that same direction, right? So what actually happens to us physically that causes such an incredible amount of symptoms? Because for a lot of us there are, and for yourself, so many physical symptoms that start happening. What actually happens in our body at that point?
Yeah. The way he explained it to me, and our main explanation of this is, everybody has a stress threshold, a maximum amount of stress or stimulation that their nervous system can handle. Now, some people have it very high, some people have it a bit lower, but in life, things happen. Stressors happen. It could be stress from food, lack of sleep, too much work, relationships, trauma, financial stress. A big one that people overlook is emotional stress and a lot of pressure they put on themselves. That's why type A personality people tend to get this more. That's like the amplifier of any kind of stressor in your life if you don't know how to handle it. And what happens is once you start to go over that threshold, that maximum limit, your brain starts to go, okay, wait a minute. There's too much going on here, too much to deal with. We need to pump the brakes and slow things down. So normally it starts to give you some symptoms like fatigue, some insomnia, maybe some anxiety, right? Maybe some brain fog. It's trying to whisper to you, hey, let's slow down. The problem is when you don't know how to interpret what it's saying, that is, hey, I'm not going to be weak. No, we're going to double down. Let's go twice as hard. And so the further you go above that threshold, the more symptoms you will get. Now, the other big stressor that comes along with this is the stress of not knowing what's happening to you. So when almost everything you do causes these weird sensations in your body and you don't know where they're coming from because they don't teach the stuff in school. Heck, most doctors don't even have an explanation for this. So now when the doctors are saying, we don't know what's going on, you think you got some rare disease, it is pretty rare, but some rare disease that there is no cure for. Then you start Googling this stuff. That's never good either. If you Google it, by the way, don't do this, guys, heart palpitations or even mosquito bite, it'll show a picture of somebody's face falling off, right? But I've had many mosquito bites that were small. It'll show you the worst of the worst. And eventually you kind of dig yourself into this hole. But anyways, back to the stress threshold, right? If your nervous system is operating above that threshold, your body is essentially going into protection mode. It's like, we're not going to whisper anymore. We're going to yell at this body to slow down, but it doesn't speak English language. It's very primal. So the only way it can get you to slow down is by giving you symptoms. That's its way of forcing the brakes on you. And if that doesn't work, it will slam on the brakes. And that's when you get people who have been dealing with this for years. If they don't reduce the stressors or it starts to compound on itself, that's when you go from like semi-functional. That's when people drop down to being housebound and then couchbound and then bedridden, depending on how much stress you have. So the way you explained it is it's kind of like a glitch in a computer. It's like if you had too many windows open on a computer, right? You have 100 windows open. It's not designed for that unless you have some supercomputer. And then your computer starts freezing. It's glitching out. Okay, this is too much. Freeze everything, maybe close a few windows. And it's kind of like that. And sometimes what pushes people over the edge, it's like just the final straw that breaks the camel's back. And that's usually what they blame as the reason for this. So it could be long COVID, could be getting a flu, could be even moving houses. That's stressful. We've seen people get this after finally completing their master's degree and just redlining their engine for years. And finally their body goes, okay, we're done with that, hibernation mode. But usually that one thing that quote unquote triggered it, that was actually like the straw that broke the camel's back. Because then we look at their past leading up to it, they're like, oh no, my life was pretty hectic beforehand. I never really felt relaxed. I would always I guess I was pretty stressed. It wasn't just this one-off event. Everything else was like a buildup, and it created the perfect storm for one more thing to come in. That's why the way we treat CFS, chronic fatigue syndrome, long COVID, even fibromyalgia is very similar. We actually put it under the same umbrella of what we call a hypersensitive nervous system issue, which is essentially you're stuck in freeze mode or fight or flight mode. And it kind of goes back and forth. It's like you're either in freeze mode where your body doesn't want to do anything and it doesn't want to move, or fight or flight mode where you have just adrenaline surging throughout your body every day. And I wonder how many people listening to this, it's like you feel tired and wired. You feel exhausted, but your brain is running 100 miles an hour. Maybe you're lying in bed. You want to go to sleep, but your body is it is like someone injected adrenaline into you. And maybe you're like shaking a little bit. So that's a crash course of how we see how this stuff comes about, which is the most important thing, because once you understand what's going on, now you have a starting point. And now we know what we're actually trying to solve and what we're trying to improve. Because without understanding, okay, what are we actually trying to fix here? we can start to run in circles, fixing mitochondria this, or maybe it's a gut thing, maybe it's this supplement, that treatment. And that's where people stay stuck in the cycle for years. And those things can help, but a lot of times the reason they don't actually solve it for good is because it's not the root cause. And that's what we've seen.
That makes a lot of sense. And just how you were saying too, that if you didn't have the earplugs or if the light was too bright, right? I feel that we come into this general oversensitization, like a real overload of input, right? When our nervous system starts coming to that point, you mentioned touch, right? That's such a familiar thing, is that everything on the body suddenly hurts or has a hot sensation or a cold sensation. Because really we're so overloaded that even our sensory inputs are becoming too much for our nervous system to process. And so it's interesting, just the range of experiences that we can have. All the roads then lead back to the nervous system, even though there are many different things going on. So I think that awareness too, right? Because it seems so far-fetched when you are experiencing this could all be coming from one place. That was the biggest thing that I was grappling with, is how can all of these different things be coming from one place? It's got to be some weird disease, or I have to have some kind of issue in my body, right? So that is that awareness building, that realization that it's just how many things really are connected to our brain and nervous system. So yeah, that's fascinating. Now, I guess the $1 million question that our listeners wanted to know is, how do you fix all of this? How do you start the healing process? And how do you support people on these journeys of, I want to say, regulating, balancing, grounding, coming more into alignment with themselves? And even after a long time that they may have been experiencing this for, how do you get them started on this road?
The foundational thing is understanding what's going on, which we just covered some of that. It's understanding the stress threshold. But the next step after that, once you can identify, okay, I've had my tests done, have my scans, I'm cleared by the doctors. Okay, it's a hypersensitive nervous system issue. The next step is, okay, what do we do about that? And the big thing there is interrupting that cycle by responding well to symptoms. That was the thing my doctor told me, which didn't make sense at first, but I'm going to share why this actually makes perfect sense. He was like, after 4 weeks of working with him, every single day, he was drawing charts out, graphs, explaining all this stuff to me. He was like, by the way, you could just forget about everything we talked about in the last month, and you've gone from bedridden to walking on your feet now. If there's one thing to remember from all of this, it's this. The golden rule in recovery is your success is determined by how well you respond to symptoms. And I was like, okay, that's the most important thing. Now, why is that so important? Where most people are stuck is in this loop where they do something, could be anything, could be physical, mental, could be maybe a small argument on the phone. Doesn't even have to be physical. Just any kind of stimulus can typically cause sensations in their body, right? Or you could call it symptoms. I like to call it sensations because it's more neutral. But people look at these sensations like, oh, this is really bad. This is not good. I'm crashing. I'm getting worse. Oh man, I'm back to square one. They almost feel like every time they flare up again, it's like the timer for recovery goes back to zero, or the journey goes back to zero, and they just undid all their progress. It's a very negative association with the symptoms, where they also feel like they screwed up. They also think, I shouldn't be feeling this. So we like to reframe that, and we just say, hey, this is not your nervous system out to get you. It's not trying to punish you. It's actually trying to protect you. So the reason you're getting this, it's kind of like working out. In order to get stronger, you don't just go to the gym and do like 500 push-ups first workout. You do it little by little. And how do you know you're making progress in the gym and actually growing muscle and getting stronger? It's when you're sore. Now, if you did a workout and you got sore, would you be upset that you're sore? Or would you be actually looking forward to it? Because you know that's moving you in the right direction, right? You'd be excited. Now, you wouldn't just keep going and doing push-ups until you get injured, right? That's what some people do. They try to push through this and keep adding on activities, but it's too much, right? There's too many symptoms to deal with. You can't respond well to something that's overwhelming. And so once you understand that, these flare-ups, we actually call them, I coined the term adjustment period. It is just your nervous system adjusting to this new level of stimulus. But once you feel those symptoms, you have to back off. You have to take it easy, just as you would with a workout. But if you keep your composure and you're able to neutralize the emotions around the symptoms as much as you can, it's not going to be pretty or perfect. There might be a lot of fear going into it, but you're not spiraling at this point. Then you give your nervous system the space to be like, oh, okay, that's the activity we're trying to get to. Okay, let's slowly adapt to it. And over time, you just gain confidence in your body. Like you go from seeing yourself as this very fragile body to now becoming anti-fragile. And you start to have a different association with the symptoms to where every sensation doesn't bring you back to square one and isn't like super negative and a downward spiral. So interrupting the downward spiral cycle is huge. Even just eliminating that, over time, you will just get better. But the way to really pour the jets on the fuel, or what is it? Pour the fuel on the fire here, turn the jets on in recovery. We see a lot of what we call hockey stick moments where someone is kind of cruising. It's almost like a stock chart with a stock that goes crazy through the roof. We see that for people's recovery sometimes. And that's when you start to have these things called mind shifts. We have this whole motto in our brand. You're just one mind shift away. Because sometimes that's all it takes. It's one understanding or one experience of you flaring up and actually not getting worse, but you being better in 1 or 2 weeks. Once you have that experience, we call it like a validation cycle. Now you know, okay, I have validated all the stuff they're saying, the Miguel's saying, and all the coaches, they're not actually crazy. They've actually been through this and it actually freaking worked. I didn't get worse. I actually got better. Once that clicks, now it's a rinse and repeat process. And we call it progress cycles. Essentially, you have some symptoms, you respond as well as you can, right? You don't go in the downward spiral. You pull back activity and then you get better. It could be a couple of days, could be as long as a month, sometimes 2 months we've seen it. But it's essentially a progress cycle. And recovery is made up of dozens and dozens of progress cycles. But eventually, after so many, you just start reintegrating back into life to the point where you don't have symptoms anymore. You actually forget that you're sick, and your identity over time, it shifts from this person who is just surviving, who gets up in the morning and they're like, oh, how am I going to make it through the day? To somebody who wakes up, jumps out of bed, and they're like, what are all the things I get to do today? I have so many options of things to do. What do I want to do? Because I could really do whatever I want. Very little limitations. So it's very cool to see that, but that's really how you get unstuck and start building momentum. One more analogy here I'd like to share with people, because when I explain it, it sounds simple, and it actually is simple, but it is difficult to do. It's very difficult to do, right? And it can take some time, right? It's not going to happen overnight. I like to compare it to, there's an image of a guy trying to push a boulder up this hill. It's so difficult in the beginning, and you're putting all this effort to move this thing maybe 1 inch, and it gets harder and harder. But eventually you reach that point where you're at the tip of the hill, and then it's just a free fall downhill. And that's kind of what it feels like. Eventually you just have so much momentum, and it's usually after your first 4 or 5 progress cycles, right? The 4 or 5 validation cycles that the stuff works. And then it becomes very easy after that. Really, it's the first few times you implement this stuff that's difficult, but then you feel recovery is inevitable because you've seen it work. Not only that, but if you're watching or listening to podcasts like this, you're hearing of other people getting better, which is also good, because that is proof your brain needs to see that this is possible. And sometimes you need to hear it 100 times for you to actually truly believe it. I know that was a longer answer, but to sum it up, it's responding well to symptoms, right? And understanding that the symptoms aren't out to get you. It is just your nervous system actually trying to protect you. So get on those progress cycles, get on those adjustment periods, and respond as well as you can. If you do that, recovery is inevitable.
I love that. And at the same time, I found that's one of the hardest things to do in this whole journey. Stick with it when that happens and understand that it's part of the process, because your mind starts going off on things. Oh, it doesn't work. It doesn't do this. Oh, I'm right back where I started. That was one of the most difficult things, but it's also the part that does, I feel, the most change and healing, and also preparation for that expanded capacity later, what you were talking about in the beginning, that now when things like chronic stress, for example, comes up, we do respond differently. We have a bit more capacity to hold those things. And that happens, that building happens, I feel, during all of these cycles that you were describing. So yeah, it's a bit of an interesting journey in a sense that sometimes we do take a few steps forward and then a few back, but it's in the sense of really respecting what our body's communicating, really listening and working with that. And that can be very healing in itself to recognize our own needs and what we need to listen to in those moments. And yeah, sometimes it's, oh, I don't have time for that, or no, I don't want to do that. But when we actually pay attention to it, we actually tune in and give ourselves that space or that rest or whatever it is that we need, it starts making a difference, starts adding up. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, I love what you're doing. And I think, unfortunately, with so many people becoming ill and stressed and having chronic pain, this is one of the things that is becoming more prevalent, and people need to hear this information so they can make informed choices about their own healing journeys. So thank you for sharing all of that. And how can our listeners connect with you? I have a feeling that you have many amazing things on offer and programs, probably things people can work with. So how can they connect with you if they're in their own challenges, if they're experiencing their own sensations or symptoms, and maybe they've already consulted a whole bunch of doctors and have been down that road, but they're still in that same situation? How can they find you?
Yeah, most people find us through our YouTube channel. I have actually at this point about 2,000 YouTube videos on recovery topics, almost any situation you could think of in recovery, whether that's types of symptoms or how to expand activity, how to avoid crashing, how to start working again, like all that stuff. People usually find us on YouTube. It's just the CFS Recovery YouTube channel. But I actually put together a special offer for your audience, Petra, because one thing I love about you is you're constantly showing up for your audience, giving them massive value. So that inspired me to do the same. And this is something my clients might actually be upset that I'm giving this away. It's usually reserved for our highest level clients, but I wanted to over deliver for your audience. So I put together something called a recovery roadmap protocol. It's not for somebody who just wants a magic pill or quick fix. If you're looking for an overnight cure, this is not it. This is for somebody, though, who is dealing with some weird, debilitating symptoms. They feel like they're doing all the right things. They're following the advice, trying different protocols. They're resting as much as they can, but nothing is actually moving the needle. And they're just feeling frustrated and lost. Really, recovery it's not about doing more. It's about doing the right things at the right stages. And if you don't know what stage you're in, you can end up wasting some precious energy or making things worse without realizing it. So here's what they have access to. There's two parts. Part one is the recovery stage identifier. So it's a short diagnostic that shows you exactly where your nervous system sits on what is the severity scale? Where am I at? Probably shows you what you've been doing, why it hasn't been working, and also what you should probably be focusing on right now. So for most people, that alone is the biggest relief they've felt in months, because there's no more guessing, there's no more trial and error. There's a lot more clear about where they're at. And part two, that's what I'm most excited about. Honestly, that's what I debated whether to include in this or not. But it's called a personalized recovery report. It's the exact internal tool we use for our high-level premium clients. But it's basically a detailed, personalized analysis based on your responses, your symptoms, history, activity levels, roadblocks. And it basically shows you what is probably good to change, what to double down on, and what order those changes probably need to happen in. So it's like a decision-making framework. And I've set up a page specifically for this podcast. It's at cfsrecovery.co/journey, JORNI. I just please ask that you guys don't share it around because this is only for you guys listening right now. But if you want the recovery stage identifier and the personalized recovery report, just go to cfsrecovery.co/JORNI and you'll be able to get immediate access to that.
Amazing. Thank you so much for offering that. I am really grateful that you're sharing such a generous resource with our listeners. And I feel that everybody listening in should go and look at that because we are usually in some kind of conflict with the nervous system if we haven't done a lot of this work before. So I feel this could make a huge difference in people's lives and really start that change and that transformation into more quality of life, better health, and really coming back to ourselves. As you said, we sometimes lose ourselves in this journey entirely and go from a vibrant being to somebody who is homebound, couch-ridden, bedridden, and really that's no way to live. And so thanks for giving everyone here the opportunity to get started on that journey and have a look for themselves on where they might be at with this. Really appreciate it. And of course, we will be linking to that in the show notes as well. So you can check there and make sure you find the link to check out the resources that Miguel shared with us. And Miguel, thanks so much for being here today and for sharing this information. As I said, I feel this is so important to get this out into the world and talk about this more. And thanks for being part of that and the amazing work that you do in helping people find their journey to recovery.
Yeah, absolutely. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for setting this up. And for everybody listening right now, my last parting message is just know recovery is possible. So many people have been in your shoes and they've gotten their lives back. So keep watching recovery story videos, keep listening to Petra's podcast here, keep absorbing the information, but more importantly, implementing as much as you can. So hope you guys got some value out of this one.
Amazing. And we'll leave our listeners with that message. I feel that's the perfect closing. I don't even want to add anything or mess with that. Take care of yourselves, everyone. And we will hear you in the next episode. Until then, be well. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen in. If you enjoy the Jōrni Podcast, please support us by subscribing, sharing on social media, and leaving us a review. We appreciate you. And you can find more of The Jōrni on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and our website, thejorni.com. Sending you love and courage, and see you next time.